wonderful sponsors. This listener, we can't do without you. Thank you for my own production team. We have Alan in the back. I hope I've left you some food for thought. Until next time, I'm Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. And until next time, don't forget to think about it.
Every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day.
You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I'm Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with the NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or you can go to our webpage. That's letstalktorah.net. The webpage has everything you need. You find the new shows, the old shows. You can search for stuff. You can leave comments. You can leave questions. We'll try to answer them. You could offer to join the show. We bring people down once in a while. If you have something to offer or just want to hang out, we can do that. And of course, the all-important donate button, which says we get to the end of the year and people are in a giving mood, we ask you to support our show as well. And that way allow us to grow, allow us to take care of our expenses here in these amazing studios of NRM Streamcast. And in advance, I do thank you. And of course, we are in the top 10 in FeedSpot's 10 best Jewish book podcasts. And today, we are at number 5. So the last show, we spent a lot of time talking about Hanukkah. It's Hanukkah season. I did want to get into this week's Torah portion, but a lot of time on Hanukkah. And there was one story that I had noticed. I wanted to share the story, and then we'll get into this week's Torah portion. So there was a man traveling from Israel, traveling through Europe. Pretty common to travel through different European countries to raise funds for Israel. And he was in a certain Italian home of a very wealthy man. And he looked at the case where the person had all his silver and all his different types of artwork. And on one of the shelves, he saw like a bunch of broken shards, like from a jar, which was a little out of place with all the silver and the finery. So as he's looking, the owner comes in and he says, "Oh, you're checking out my bookcase over there, checking out what I got. See anything interesting?" I said, the man says, "Yeah, I see this broken glass." You're like, wow. He says, "I got to tell you a fascinating story." He says, when I was growing up in Europe, and my uncle, I was sent to a very wealthy uncle in Italy, and I helped him, grow his business, and I was very successful. But the more successful I came, the less religious I became. Got married, had children, but there was nothing religious in my life. And one day I'm walking down the street, and I see a group of boys, and one boy is just crying and crying and crying, and I walk over, I said, "What's the matter?" And the boy's crying, and he says, "No, I'm in so much trouble." He said, "What?" He says, "No, tonight is Hanukkah, and my father gave me money. We're not wealthy. Forget wealthy. We're poor. My father had enough money to buy oil for the holiday. So he gave me money. He said, please go to the store, buy the jar of oil, but please be careful when you come home. Please be careful." And I bought the oil, and I saw my friends playing, and I stopped here to play. And while we were playing, I knocked into the jar, and I broke it, and all the oil spilled out. So the man says, "That's terrible. Let me take you to the store. I'm going to buy you a new jar of oil. I feel terrible for you." So he takes the boy by the hand. They walk back to the store, and he buys him a jar of oil. And then he's sitting there and he says, I used to be that boy. I used to love Hanukkah, and I didn't even know tonight is Hanukkah. So he goes back to the store, and he buys all the paraphernalia, the menorah, and the oil, and everything you need. And then he says, let me go back to what that boy was playing. He goes back, he finds the broken shards of glass, and he says, I took those pieces wrapped up in a handkerchief, and I took it home. That night, I come home, and I start to step the menorah. My wife asks what I'm doing. My kids ask what I'm doing. Like, we weren't religious. And I said, no, tonight is the first night of Hanukkah, and I can't believe that I forgot about the holiday. I didn't even know we're so far removed. I didn't even know that tonight is the first night of the holiday. And we're going to light the menorah. And he said, and from there, I slowly progressed, and I became back religious. And that is the story of these shards of glass, which is in its own way just like amazing that, it doesn't take a lot to affect us. And sometimes it's like, it's the stuff that may seem to have no value, like those broken pieces of glass, that in the end have the most value. So hopefully many of us have children, and we know how children are. Children fight, children bicker. We always wonder, we hope, we pray that one day they'll grow older and they'll be best buddies. I've watched it with my own children. I think my own children didn't fight when they were younger, but now that they've gotten older, they could be best friends. And I'm sure that's what Jacob wanted from his children. But the trials and tribulations that the brothers should be able to be back as one is a difficult road. And it begins in this week's Torah portion. Joseph is Jacob's favorite son. He is the smartest. He is the most talented. And he also is the firstborn of his favorite wife. Everything Jacob did, all his troubles, the 14 years of working for his father-in-law Lavan was just to marry Rachel. And he got tricked, and he ends up marrying Leah first, and then he marries Rachel. And she doesn't even have children right away. And finally Joseph is born. This is the apple of his eye. So much so that he buys him a special jacket or a special coat. Multicolored, some say. Others say it just had a stitch of silver in it. Others say the sleeves were a little bit longer to show that Joseph is not supposed to do regular labor. He's just supposed to study all day long. And you can imagine that the brothers are jealous. But Joseph doesn't help himself. And you can have a favorite son, and everybody realizes that, right? Our kids do it all the time. Oh, you like this one best. Oh, you always nice to that one. Oh, you always buy this one presents. Okay, but we try to move past that, right? Everybody gets what they need, what they deserve. But Joseph makes it harder for him. Because Joseph tattletales, he slanders. Now, Joseph obviously believes that he's helping his brothers. If he feels they're doing something wrong, then he tells the father, doing something wrong, we gotta take care of this. So he says they're making fun of the children of the maidservants, and they're marrying ladies they shouldn't be marrying, and they're eating meat that's not fully kosher. But let's not get into the details on that now. The brothers probably would have preferred that Joseph come straight to them. Joseph probably understood, if I come to you, you're just going to yell and scream at me. So that's already happening in the house. And the brothers are nervous that the same way you have Abraham has 2 children, but the Jewish people come from Isaac, and Isaac has 2 children, the Jewish people come from Jacob. The brothers were concerned that that's what Joseph is trying to accomplish. That Jacob has 12 children, but the Jewish people will come from Joseph. They can tag along for the ride if they wish. And then Joseph has the dreams. And he tells the dreams to his brothers. And the dreams clearly signify that Joseph is supposed to be king over them. So you don't like this brother. Now he's having dreams. You've by mistake interpreted the dreams, right? For those who don't remember, the first dream is Joseph says, I saw the brothers bundling stalks, or bundles of stalks, and the 11 bundles of the brothers surround Joseph, single bundle, and all the bundles bow down. The brothers say, you think you'd be king over us? Right? Because interpreting a dream is very important for the power of the dream, and the brothers, not realizing, interpret it, now they're angry. And then Joseph has another dream. This time the brothers get a little smarter, then I can interpret it. And this one is there's 11 stars, and there's a sun and the moon, and they're all bowing down to Joseph. So what does Joseph do? He waits for his father, tells the dream over to his father, and his father says, come on, Joseph, you think you're going to be king? The dream says the moon's bowing down, but the moon should signify your mother, and your mother's not alive. Jacob was trying to calm down the brothers, but he again interpreted the dream. So, with all this, again, Joseph was 17 years old. Right? Let's remember that. He's 17 years old. So the brothers go to shepherd. They had wherever they were shepherding, and Jacob, for an unimaginable reason, tells Joseph, go check on your brothers. I want to know how they're doing. So Joseph should say to his father, like, Pops, you know my brother's going to kill me. Right? Don't you think it's a little dangerous? I should check up on them? But Joseph doesn't say a word. If his father says to go, Joseph goes. The commentaries do ask, like, what was Jacob thinking? They prove from a verse that this wasn't Jacob's idea. God put this idea into Jacob's head because Joseph needs to go down to Egypt. He needs to become king in Egypt so that when the hunger comes, he'll be able to support his family. And this will be the gateway. This will bring down Jacob and his descendants because God had already told Abraham we're going to be slaves in a land that's not ours, and it's got to start. And so therefore, Joseph will lead the way. At least it'll be good at the beginning. So it's all a plan. It's all a plan. And Joseph goes and he runs into the angel. And he says to the angel, he went to the city his father told him to go to, and the brothers weren't there. So he sees the angel. Whether he knows it's an angel or not, I can't tell you. And he says, the verse calls him a man, and he says, I'm looking for my brothers. And the angel says, your brothers have left here. Meaning, they're not your brothers. They're not acting like brothers. If I was you, I'd go home. But Joseph misses the message. And Joseph follows. He sees his brothers, the brothers see him, and the brothers immediately convene a court. And they say, we believe that our brother Joseph is trying to throw us out of the Jewish people. We're going to lose all the spirituality we could have gotten by being part of the Jewish people. He is like a murderer, and they said he deserves a death penalty. And all the brothers were in agreement with this, in principle. But there's something called mercy. And Reuven says to himself, I'm the oldest. If we kill Joseph, our father is going to be angry at me. I'm the oldest. I didn't take my responsibility. How could I let this happen to Joseph? So Reuven saves Joseph. What did he tell the brothers? He said, come on, let's not kill him with our hands. We're not murderers. But we agreed that he should be killed. So let's throw him in the pit. Let's throw him over here in the pit. And God will kill him. Now, the verse tells us that Reuven had actually planned he's going to come back later that night, and he'll get Joseph out of the pit, they'll carry him home, he'll tell his father, you keep Joseph home, do not let him hang out with the brothers. That is a very, very dangerous thing. So Reuven then disappears, debatable where he goes, and the brothers, after they put Joseph in the pit, sit down to eat. You basically just signed your brother's death sentence. How are you sitting down to eat? Because the brothers felt we didn't do anything wrong. We are doing the right thing. so we can sit down to eat. And then there's a traveling caravan. And the caravan is actually carrying sweet-smelling spices, not the normal kerosene that they carried. And Judah says, why should we kill him? It's not necessary to kill him. We'll sell him to these Ishmaelites. They will take him down to Egypt. He'll be a slave. We will never see Joseph again. And the brothers agree. That's why the brothers are going to be upset later at Judah. They said, we listened to you to sell him. We would have listened to you to send him home. So it is fascinating. So Joseph is now traveling on this caravan to go down to Egypt. Now, who cares that this caravan was carrying nice spices? Joseph has lost everything. He studied Torah with his father. He lived with his father. He loved his father. Now he's being sent away from home to Egypt. So, and God says, look, I'm appeasing you, Joseph. There's nice smelling spices. You can keep your nice smelling spices. Yeah, he's a slave. So the answer to this, or a answer to this, is that God is showing Joseph, I have a reason why you have to be sold as a slave. I have my reasons. You don't get to know my reasons right away. But by having the spices here, at least you know that I'm taking care of you. I'm involved. My hand is here. You're not alone. And that, by the way, is a very comforting thought. Even when things are bad, but if we recognize, if we feel, if we understand, if we know that God is hanging out there with us and God is taking care of us, that alone is comforting. And that was the message that God was showing Joseph when he sends him on a sweet-smelling caravan. The brothers take Joseph's coat and they slaughter a goat and they dip it in the blood because goat's blood is similar to human blood, and they bring it to Jacob, and obviously they're fooling their father. And Jacob is inconsolable. He will cry for the next 22 years. That's where the brothers get upset at Judah, like, the father doesn't stop crying, right? That was the plan. But it's too late now, right? We can't go get Joseph, at least not at that point. So Joseph is sold to Egypt. There is another part in the Torah portion, but I'm not going to have time for that today. We just want to continue with the story of Joseph. So Joseph is sold to Potiphar. Potiphar is either the officer of the butcher, he's the head butcher, or he's the head executioner. In either case, Joseph, everything he touches, as we say, turns to gold. He is like amazing. And everything he's running runs to perfection. Everything is growing. The food, everything is just great. And the master realizes this. And the interesting enough, the verse says the master saw that God was with Joseph. The master doesn't believe in God. You might say my idol's with Joseph is one thing. But the master says that God is with Joseph because all day long, Joseph blamed everything on God. And so if Joseph is blaming everything on God, and every time something well and everything works out, just blame it on God, it must be God. So as things improve, now Joseph, obviously, he's not going to be sleeping, outside in the shed, right? He's running the whole house. He's running the whole empire here of the Sayat HaBachim, of this officer. He gets better accommodations. He starts getting better food. And Joseph starts to take care of himself. Perhaps he was very depressed. You can only imagine. So you feel a little bit better when you comb your hair and you look more presentable. And God says your father is home crying, and you're making yourself look pretty. You're looking in the mirror for an extra few seconds every morning. It says now you're getting a test. This test, by the way, that Joseph passes, is why Joseph is known as Joseph the Righteous. Yosef HaTzadik, he gets a title next to his name. We refer to him as the Righteous Joseph. So the wife of Potiphar basically throws herself at Joseph and says, I want you to sleep with me. Joseph refuses. Now it's fascinating. he could just say, God doesn't let. Because in the 7 Noahide laws, you're not allowed to sleep with a married lady. But he doesn't say that. He gives her a whole speech. And he says to her, your husband put me in charge of the whole house. I'm in charge of everything. He trusts me with everything. The only thing he warned me about was you. How I can't be such an ingrate. I have gratitude to your husband. Otherwise, I'd be a slave sleeping out, if I'm lucky in the shed. So how could you ask me to do this? And then Joseph throws in, and by the way, it would be a sin. And by the way, it'd be a sin. Like, whoa, what do you mean, and by the way, it'd be a sin? That should be reason number one. But sometimes when we're looking to fight our evil inclination, the best way to do it is to say, it doesn't make sense to do this sin for multiple reasons. And then you want to throw in because God said so. Sometimes if the only reason is because God said so, it doesn't work so good for some of us, or many of us. We find the same thing in last week's Torah portion. When Jacob calls out Rachel and Leah and says, it's time to leave, they say, well, our father, there's nothing for us to inherit, and he sold us instead of giving us dowries. And then they said it because God said. Again, sometimes just to make it easier, we need to find reasons that our brain accepts. And after we have reasons that our brain accepts, then we're ready to go ahead and say, and by the way, God said. Okay, but the day comes, and, you can only handle so much. There's no one home. There's a big holiday. And the wife of Potiphar and Joseph are alone. And this time she gives it all she's got. She gives it all she's got. She's going to get Joseph to give in. And he almost does. He's really ready to give in, because when it comes to fighting the evil inclination, we need help from God as well. We can't just carry on the battle alone. We're not strong enough. If God sees we're putting in everything we got, God helps. So either he sees a picture of his father, he gets a message from his father, he's thinking, God puts it in his mind. But Jacob tells Joseph that, your name, you're going to have a stone on the breastplate of the high priest. And if you sin, your stone will be dimmed. It won't be bright like everybody else's. So Joseph has the wherewithal, he gets up and he runs. And this wife Potiphar grabs his shirt and rips it off him. Joseph runs out. There's nowhere to go. He's a slave, right? He can't escape the country. So this nasty lady, after she's been trying to convince Joseph to sleep with her, what does she do? She tells first the servants to get everybody talking, and then she tells her husband, this slave you brought, he attacked me. He wanted to sleep with me. See what she did? She went from her begging Joseph, when she's turned down for the final time, she accuses Joseph of trying to rape her. The husband, of course, incensed, but the husband knew his wife, and he knew that her story seemed a little fishy. She did have his coat. She claimed, she screamed, but there's no one around to tell us what's going on. So he went to the smartest people in town. In those days, the only people that had any intelligence were the priests. So he went to the Egyptian priests, and he said, how do I know who's telling the truth? My slave says he ran away. My wife says he attacked him. And she has the shirt. So they said, see where the shirt is ripped. If it's ripped in front, that means he was attacking her and she was clawing at him. If it's ripped in the back, it means he was running away and she grabbed it. Sure enough, it's ripped in the back. But no one is embarrassing their wife and taking the word of a slave. That is not happening. So since that's not happening, so he's not going to kill Joseph, but he will put him in jail. So, but Joseph will appreciate what the priest did for him to save him, and later on, before the hunger starts, Joseph convinces the Pharaoh that we should be feeding the clergy. We should be taking care of the clergy, so they're going to get food during the hunger. They don't have to give their money, they don't have to give their land. Joseph does really, really take care of them as an appreciation. So now Joseph's in jail. He's actually going to be in jail for 12 years. But first he's in jail for 9 years. After 9 years, the two officers of Pharaoh sin. One is the one that pours the cup. He's obviously an advisor. He stands next to Pharaoh. The other one is the baker. And in the bread, there was a pebble, which probably broke the king's tooth when he chewed on it. That's bad. And a fly fell into the cup that the cup pourer was giving. So both of them are thrown to jail. Now this jail, which happens to be the jail that the head butcher or executioner is in charge of, was not meant as a jail that you sat there for years. This was really a jail that the king would send his own personal prisoners. If somebody gets the king angry, he throws them in this jail. A few days later, the king thinks about it. Either they execute him or he gives him back his job. But for some strange reason, Pharaoh forgets about these two guys for a full year. After you, they both have dreams. I don't have time to go through the dreams, but they both have dreams. And they're despondent the next morning. The look on their face is just terrible. And Joseph walks in and says, "Hey, what's the matter with you guys? What's doing?" As Joseph didn't say, like, "Hey, they're in a bad mood. I don't want to talk to them." No, they're in a bad mood. He asked them, "What's troubling you?" This is an amazing lesson that we all have to walk away with. I've told you this story multiple times, and I probably don't have time now to get through it. But when you see somebody is depressed or unhappy or something's bothering him, you gotta ask the person, is everything okay? Because Joseph asks if everything is okay, so Sarmashkim tells him over the dream. Joseph interprets the dream that he's gonna live, and then he interprets the baker's dream that he's gonna die, and then the poor gets out, and 2 years later, when Pharaoh has his dream, he says, "Oh yeah, I know a guy in jail who interprets dreams." But just to give you an example, what does it mean when you see somebody who's unhappy or not acting himself? So this morning in synagogue, a friend of mine who had hip surgery probably 2 or 3 months ago. So you can just see he's like discombobulated. He's just not with it, and he doesn't talk the way he normally talks. And his cane fell down, and he like gave a command, "Somebody pick up my cane." He never talks this way. It's just not how this guy talks. So I go over to him. I see he's unhappy. I say, "Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay." Now, by his tone of voice, I realize he's fine. There's not a mental anguish or situation. Probably something with his hip is so troubling him that he's unhappy. But I just asked him if he's okay. So he texted me later this morning, and he says, I want to apologize. My hip was just acting up, and I thought that the surgery didn't go well, and I went back to the surgeon, and the surgeon told me it's very normal, it's the way it's supposed to be. I'm so sorry that I snapped at you. And I said, "No problem." I said, "You don't have to apologize to me. The whole reason that I went over was to see if you're feeling okay. I just need to make sure. If somebody doesn't look like everything is hunky-dory, then you gotta at least ask, are you okay?" And I could tell from the way you answered me that everything was not okay. So very good. You're fine. Now you're in a better mood. That's all I wanted from you. And, okay, I see. I think I have another few seconds. So the dream that Joseph interprets, by the way, so the cup bearer, he tells Joseph his dream. What's the dream? He sees a stalk, and on the stalk is 3 branches, and on the branches I see flowers and buds and clusters of grapes, and that I'm squeezing the cluster of grapes into the cup of Paro, and then I put on his arm, on his hand, and Joseph says, "You win, you're gonna live." But I hear the music is playing. So I hope you enjoyed it, short and sweet. Thank you, of course, to all my wonderful sponsors listening. I can't do it without you. Thank you to the wonderful production team. We have Al in the back. I hope I have some food for thought. Until next time, I'm Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. And until next time, don't forget to think about it.
Is all it's gonna take. world we're gonna make. There's a house we can build, every room inside is filled